today we're heading straight into Exodus 37.
Yep.
Which is really cool because we get to look at the creation of some very important religious objects.
That's right.
So we're going to be looking at the construction of
The ark.
the ark,
Yeah.
the table, the lampstand, and the altar of incense.
Right.
And we're going to be extracting the key details
Yes.
about how they were made.
Uh-huh.
So the materials, dimensions,
and the purpose.
as described in the text.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So think of this as a deep dive into ancient craftsmanship and design. And as we go through this, I'd like you, the listener, to think about why these instructions and materials might have been so important.
Yeah.
What do you think these specific choices convey in terms of ideas or values?
Right.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's do it.
And I think we should start with the ark.
Okay.
Well, so the description is actually really precise. We learned that Bezalel built the ark
Okay.
using acacia wood.
Okay.
And in terms of its size, it was 2.5 cubits long,
Huh?
1.5 cubits wide,
Okay.
and 1.5 cubits high.
Now, for people who don't know what a cubit is.
Right, a cubit is roughly the length from your elbow to the tip of your middle finger.
Okay.
So, we're talking several feet in each dimension.
Okay.
But I think what's striking here
Yeah.
is that it was overlaid
Okay.
with pure gold,
Oh, wow.
inside and out.
Oh, wow.
Even a gold molding around the edges.
So they spared no expense. No expense spared.
Okay.
And this tells us right away that this was a really valuable object,
Right.
not just in terms of money, but also in terms of the care that went
Yes.
into its construction.
That's like they're trying to make this as valuable as possible.
As valuable as possible.
Yeah.
And, gold beyond just its monetary value might
Yeah.
symbolize purity,
Okay.
divinity, or sort of the unblemished nature of the sacred space it represented.
Right, because it's going to be holding the word of God.
The most sacred objects. Yeah.
So it wasn't just a functional container.
Well, yeah, it was something special.
It was something extraordinary.
Something set apart.
Yeah. And the way it was meant to be moved.
Oh, right.
Because it wasn't designed to be just stationary.
Right, it wasn't just going to sit in one place.
Yeah.
It had 4 gold rings that were attached to its feet,
Okay.
2 on each side,
Okay.
and then poles made of acacia wood.
Acacia wood again.
Again, also covered in gold,
Covered in gold.
were inserted into these rings for
Okay.
transport.
Okay.
So this gives us a sense that it was meant to be portable.
Right.
It was meant to travel with the people.
Okay.
But the use of poles is also interesting.
Yeah. Why do you think poles?
Well, I think it suggests a certain reverence,
Okay.
a desire to avoid direct contact
With the ark itself.
with the ark itself.
Okay.
So they're not supposed to touch it.
They're not supposed to touch on.
Only the poles.
Okay.
So I think the design here really emphasizes both the sacredness and the practical reality of their journey.
Yeah, because they're going to be wandering
Exactly.
for 40 years.
40 years in the wilderness.
Right.
Yeah.
Now this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay. Right.
The atonement cover.
The atonement cover.
This wasn't just part of the ark.
Right.
It was a separate piece.
Yeah.
That was equally important.
It was equally important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the atonement cover was also made of pure gold,
Oh, wow.
same length and width as the ark itself.
Okay.
And then we have these 2 cherubims.
Cherubim.
Yeah.
Okay.
That were shaped from hammered gold.
Hammered gold.
Hammered gold.
Wow.
One at each end.
One at each end.
And the text specifically says that they were made of one piece with the cover.
What does that even mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible skill.
Yeah.
I mean, to hammer out gold
Yeah.
and create these figures that are all one piece with the cover itself.
That's incredible.
That's really something.
Right.
And the hammered aspect is also interesting.
What do you mean?
Well, it might not just be a construction detail.
Right.
Could also suggest, the forceful shaping of divine imagery.
Like God is shaping this.
Exactly.
Okay.
The imagery is powerful too.
Yeah. I mean, you have these cherubims with their wings spread upward, like they're protecting.
Yeah, like they're protecting,
cover.
right, overshadowing it.
Okay.
And they faced each other.
Go.
And they're looking down towards the cover.
You can almost picture it.
Yeah, you can really visualize it.
Yeah.
Um,
That detail
yeah.
about them being of one piece.
Right.
With the cover.
It's a really curious detail.
Yeah. What do you think that symbolizes?
Well, It suggests to me that the cherubim weren't just decorations that were added on later.
Right.
They were fundamentally linked to the atonement cover itself.
Okay.
Maybe they symbolize, an inseparable connection to the divine presence or the mercy represented by the cover.
Okay, so they're not just like decorations, they're actually
Part of it.
part of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we think about, the bigger picture, cherubim are often associated with guarding sacred spaces and divine authority.
Makes sense.
Yeah. The table.
The table.
And again, we see acacia wood.
Yeah, acacia wood.
And gold.
And gold, yes.
That seems to be a theme here.
It's a recurring motif.
Yeah.
So the table was 2 cubits long,
Okay.
1 cubit wide, and 1.5 cubits high.
Okay.
Just like the ark.
Yeah.
It was overlaid with pure gold
Okay.
and had a gold molding.
Okay.
But there are some interesting differences here.
What do you mean?
Well, it mentions a rim.
A rim.
Yeah, a rim that was a handbreadth wide
A handbreadth wide.
with its own gold molding.
Okay.
And this seems like a very deliberate design choice.
Okay.
Maybe it was to prevent things from falling off,
Right.
but it also probably made it look really ornate.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And then once again, we have these 4 gold rings at the corners where the legs would have been,
Okay.
specifically positioned close to the rim
Okay.
to hold the carrying poles.
So just like the ark, it was portable.
Yes, portability was key. And the carrying poles were unsurprisingly made of acacia wood
Okay.
and overlaid with gold.
Okay.
But the description actually goes into more detail.
Really?
Yeah, it describes specific articles
Oh.
that were made for the table.
Okay, so we're talking about tableware now.
Tableware, yeah.
Okay.
So these were plates,
Uh-huh.
dishes,
Okay.
bowls, and pitchers
What were the pitchers for?
for pouring out drink offering.
Okay, so this table was clearly
Yes.
used for rituals.
Absolutely.
Oh, cool.
And they were all made of pure gold.
Even the tableware.
Even the tableware.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on, we have the lampstand.
Lampstand. Okay.
And this one is really intricate.
Yeah, it's very detailed.
Yeah.
Unlike the ark and the table,
Okay.
the lampstand was made entirely of pure gold.
Wow. So no acacia wood this time?
No acacia wood this time.
Okay.
And it was hammered out.
Hammered out of bolt.
Hammered out of the base, the shaft, the flower-like cups, buds, and blossoms,
Wow.
all formed from one piece.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, this would have taken amazing skill
Yeah.
and artistry.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. So the structure itself is very specific.
Yeah,
6 branches extending from the sides.
6 branches,
Okay.
3 on each side,
Okay.
and each of these 6 branches had 3 cups
Okay.
shaped like almond flowers.
Almond flowers. Okay.
Complete with buds and blossoms.
Okay.
And then on the central shaft itself,
Fine.
there were 4 almond flower-shaped cups.
That's interesting that they chose almond flowers.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if there's some symbolism there.
Yeah, like almonds are often associated with
New life.
new life.
Awakening, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's also this interesting detail about connecting buds. Yeah, so there was a bud located
Okay.
under each pair of branches
Okay.
as they extended from the central shaft.
Okay.
And this emphasizes the unified nature of the design.
Yeah.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
the accompanying items were also very valuable.
They had 7 lamps,
7 lamps.
wick trimmers,
Okay.
and trays,
Uh-huh.
all made of pure gold.
Pure gold, everything.
Everything pure gold.
Wow.
And to give you a sense of scale,
Yeah.
the whole lampstand
Uh-huh.
and all of its accessories
Okay.
were made from 1 talent of pure gold.
1 talent.
1 talent.
Okay.
Now, talent was a huge unit of weight back then.
Okay, so we're talking about a lot of gold.
A lot of gold.
Right. Yeah.
So this was a major investment.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about how important light
Yeah.
and illumination were
Yeah.
to their rituals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and finally we have
Okay.
the Altar of Incense.
The Altar of Incense.
And it looks like we're back to acacia wood
Back to acacia wood.
for the foundation.
Yes. So the Altar of Incense was square,
Okay.
1 cubit long.
1 cubit wide
Okay.
and 2 cubits high.
Okay.
And the horns.
The horns.
Yeah, the horns of the altar.
Yeah.
Were of one piece with the rest of it,
So they were carved
out of the same piece of wood.
piece of wood.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And of course, the sides and the horns
Okay.
were all overlaid with pure gold,
Of course.
and it had a gold molding around it as
Yeah.
well.
And how was this altar
Oh yeah, good.
designed to be carried?
Well, like the other objects,
Okay.
it had 2 gold rings
Uh-huh.
positioned below the molding
Okay.
on opposite sides
Okay.
to hold acacia wood poles.
Acacia wood poles, again, overlaid with gold.
Overlaid with gold.
They really love that gold.
It really did.
Yeah, so there's definitely a pattern here
Definitely.
with the acacia wood and the gold
Yeah.
and the portability.
Portability is key.
Yeah.
But the text also mentions some other preparations that were made.
Yeah.
So it describes the creation of the sacred anointing oil
Oh.
and the pure fragrant incense.
Incense.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it specifically says that this was the work of a perfumer.
Oh, so they had specialists.
They had specialists.
Yeah.
And I think this detail really highlights
Yeah.
the sensory dimension of
Yeah.
these objects and the rituals.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about the visual, it was also about the smell.
Right. The olfactory experience.
The olfactory experience, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as we look at all of these descriptions,
Mm-hmm.
a few things stand out to me.
Yeah, what are you thinking?
Well, they consistently used acacia wood
Acacia wood.
for the underlying structure,
Right.
but then they covered everything in gold.
Gold.
Right.
Yeah.
And they give us very specific dimensions
Very specific.
for each object.
Mhm.
So there was a meticulous plan here.
A plan. Yeah.
And they always mention these gold rings and
Yeah.
acacia wood poles
Oh, yeah.
overlaid with gold.
Uh-huh.
So portability was very important.
Portability was key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm wondering is,
Yeah.
why do you think they went into so much detail
That's a good question.
about the materials,
Yeah.
the measurements,
Yeah.
even how to carry them?
Why all this detail?
Yeah, what does that tell us
Yeah, what does that tell us?
about how important these objects were to them?
Yeah. I mean, it seems like they really wanted to emphasize the significance of these objects.
Yeah.
And not just their function,
Right.
but also their symbolic meaning.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think the listeners should really think about that.
Yeah, think about why all this detail
Yeah.
is here.
And given the craftsmanship
Yeah.
and the precious material,
Right.
what kind of impact
Yeah.
do you think these objects would have had
Yeah. What would it have been like
on the people who saw them?
to encounter these objects?
Yeah, what kind of questions
Yeah.
does this raise for you
Yeah.
about their purpose and meaning?
Yeah. I mean, maybe they were trying to create
Yeah.
not just implements for ritual,
Mhm.
but powerful focal points
Yeah.
for reverence and connection.
Reverence and connection.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a great place to leave it.
Yeah, I think so too.
And hopefully the listener
Yeah.
will continue to ponder this
You ponder.
long after this deep dive is
Yes.
over.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.